Hello there, very good evening and welcome to Recount Watch for today, the 18th day of May. I'm your host, Eddie Lane, and I have with me via Zoom as usual, Peter Ramsaroop, economist, as well as Ms. Gail Teixeira, a candidate for the People's Progressive Party Civic. Peter, Gail, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Good evening to all your viewers.
Well, today is the 13th. We have completed the 13th day of the recount. And I understand today just about 53 boxes were counted.
Yeah.
I think the issue remains the slothfulness of this process, bearing in mind there was a set 25-day timeline to complete this process. So I'm going to start with you, Comrade Gail, your opening comments with regards to the exercise, how it has been going, and maybe a little bit on today's activities.
Well, we're now halfway point. If the GCOM keeps to the 25 days, which is looking more and more difficult to achieve, almost impossible, that we're at the halfway point, and yet we have not completed 50% of the ballot boxes. We've only done about 604 out of 2,339. So we're probably, you'll check my maths, but probably about 1/3 or 1/4 actually of the ballot boxes have been counted. And part of the reason for this is the slothfulness in dealing with Region 4, which is, as we all know, is a tactic of the APNU AFC to delay as long as possible and stretch it out as long as possible. Our viewers may know or may not know that Region 1 finished on Friday, but only they were able to get the final report for it on Sunday, and Region 2 was completed today, and Region 6 has started being counted today. We understand that Region 7 will start counting tomorrow. So in other words, they will be Regions 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 will start. The public may or may not know either that the COVID task force, as anticipated, did not agree to the request of GCOM, a constitutional body, for 6 additional stations, and took a long time from last week, Wednesday, to today to indicate that they will only allow 2 more stations. And what GCOM has done is assign another station to Region 6 and 1 to Region 7, an additional 1 to Region 7. Therefore, the region with the most ballots still to count, over 700, still has only 3 stations counting Region 4. And so this, again, is not a wise decision they've made. You would think they would try to and want to finish or to get over the biggest hump in the largest region, Region 4. But they have assigned Region 7 for tomorrow and assigned an additional station for Region 6. So the PPP's view is that they're continuing to drag out and to try to delay as long as possible the conclusion of Region 4.
Peter, your opening comments with regards to the exercise that's been going so far.
Well, I mean, following up with what Comrade Gail said, I mean, the funny part of all of this, if I can use the term funny, is that, what has been counted so far, the PPP is currently almost 30,000 votes ahead from the boxes that are counted. So no matter how slow they go in Region 4, there is still no path for them to make up 15,000 votes for an election win. So they're showing that they're trying to manipulate the process in some form, and our Region 4 was the slowest today in the count. But ultimately, at the end of it all, there is no path, and I repeat, for Mr. Granger to be sworn in as president of Guyana ever again. So no matter if we get all the other 9 regions, we have seen the 9 declarations that has happened prior to Region 4 on March 4th. we saw the PPP lead by 50,000. What we're seeing right now is exactly those same numbers matching up. So the slowness of Region 4 is still not going to get them a path to win an election. So they might as well get on with counting the boxes and let's get the country back to governance and economic future and get our citizens back to having a legitimate government in place.
Comrade Gail, you touched briefly on the 2 additional stations that were added
yes.
by the GCOM chair. Excuse me, but I mean, we all know that the initial request was for 6 additional stations.
Right.
The fact of the matter is, and I think this is something that we need to talk about a little more, is that GCOM didn't need any approval whatsoever from the task force.
Absolutely.
They have already been given the guidelines within which they are to operate. It therefore means all that was required of GCOM really is to ensure they can add how many more stations they want, but to ensure that they work within those guidelines in keeping with the social distancing, the sanitization, etc., etc. But you also touched on the fact that the allocation, even the allocation of these additional stations, when you have Region 4, the largest region, which is a fraction through. If you can spend some more time to give the public an understanding of what really is going on here.
Well, I mean, we're not surprised. First of all, you're right. GCOM as a constitutional body didn't need to ask approval from the National Task Force, which is not a body with any legal status. It is a task force to deal with COVID. It could ask for guidance, it could ask for advice, technical advice, but what has happened, and we had protested about this before, that GCOM did not need to appear to get approval from the task force. We all know who heads the task force: Prime Minister Nagamutu, Valda Lawrence, Amna Ali, and of course the chief person of all, really, who's controlling the task force is Joe Harmon, who's been put there specially, I think, to use COVID as a political weapon over the next period of the recount. That's my personal view. But clearly, here was a body that is led by all interested parties, all candidates in the election, who are waiting for the results as we are, but who are using the COVID-19 pandemic as a means to continuing delay, because clearly, had they allowed the 6 more stations, it would allow to a massive increase in the number of votes being counted, and we could have come much closer to the 25 days than we will now. And so the 2 days is a kind of concession, because they really don't have a reasonable reason to not grant it. And so it is clear that the COVID has been used for political purposes in Guyana. And as I said, clearly by persons who are themselves candidates. We also have the view of Alexander before, and that was after the request was made by the chairman to the task force. He was kind of preempting the response by saying that the building has already too many people in it. The task force said only 132 people should be there. And in fact, any day, at any time, there could be 300 to 400 people moving in and out of the building. And clearly he was kind of preempting, in a sense, or preparing the ground for the COVID task force and Mr. Harmon's view, or the decision or the recommendation of the task force, that it should only be 2. So clearly, I think that the task force, despite what Mr. Granger said on Sunday, that, he bemoaned the fact that the elections are taking so long and this would never happen again. At the same time, his cohorts and his people who he controls are the ones who are the ones delaying, both using the task force and their representatives in the workstations, particularly in Region 4, where they keep raising ludicrous allegations which they can't substantiate with any facts whatsoever.
Peter, I want to bring you in here as well because we've had some developments as well, and the PUB had cause to write to GCOM with regards to the appointment of a supervisor who happens to be someone who was identified, matter of fact, questioned by the police as part of the Mingo plan. I see the media is referring to him as the flash drive guy, and I guess all of Guyana know who that person is. So, Peter, a quick comment from you with regards to this appointment, putting someone who has been identified or accused of being involved in the plot to supervise in the Region 4 area.
Well, definitely. I mean, it's absurd that GCOM will, blatantly, defy the odds of common sense and put this gentleman to be in charge of a station. I was there in the Ashman building. I was witness the fact that he took the flash drive. I witnessed the fact he was inputting data. I saw the police investigate him. I don't know what happened with that police investigation. So he should not be anywhere near the IT component of this recount. I mean, and the PP did write the commission, and we hope to get a response very soon on it. And we disagree with that. So the fact that they put him on Region 4, they have to know. And again, Guyanese need to know that Region 4 numbers are public out there. We know what the statement of polls will read at the end of this statement of recount. So no matter what they finagle in the process here, it will not change the final outcome of this election. It will show that APNU has lost this election by 15,000 plus votes. So again, I mean, why not, Claude Singh and the commission allow the Secretariat to get the job done? Comrade Gail said 2 workstations. They requested 6. It was approved by 2, the politics of election, and we've got to be concerned. And I want to bring this in. Guyana is in a state of economic crisis. It's in a state of political crisis. We have election fraud, which is a serious crime. We have beneficiaries of election fraud that is happening right now. At the end of it, all our citizens need to be able to have a development plan in place where they can see a better life. And for Mr. Granger to continue to defy all odds and stay in power when he knows, when he visited the conference center yesterday, he knows he lost the elections. He wants to walk in and act like president. He did some illegal acts by meeting with the Secretariat when only, he's a presidential candidate. He is not the president and can go in to meet with the Secretariat. So he broke his own rules that says he doesn't interfere with the work of the commission. So we as Guyanese want to ensure that the process is completed as quickly as possible. We want to get back with our lives. And as our president-elect said today, Dr. Irfan Ali, he's got a national task ahead of him to bring the coalition together of national defenders of democracy, and how do he put a development plan in place where every single Guyanese across the political divide will benefit from a Dr. Ali administration and a PPP administration. And that's what we have to look forward to, and that's why we want the recount to go quicker, smoother, transparent, and accountable.
Eddie, if I can go back to the letter though, really, because in addition to what Peter, you're saying there's 2 other points in the letter that I want to emphasize. One is the question in the letter written by the election agent of the People's Progressive Party, Zulfikar Mustafa. And that is in regards to the meeting with Mr. Granger, where he was accorded, presidential courtesies and privileges, and a meeting with the chairman and senior staff of GCOM with his persons who are all candidates, Harman, Amna Ali, Kathy Hughes, etc. And therefore, this is highly unusual. I can't remember any election where the presidential candidate met with the chairman and senior staff, such as the CEO and the deputy CEO, without the presence of the other commissioners. And so I think I want to flag that because this is highly improper and highly unusual. when President Donald Ramotar went to meet Dr. Surj Bali on the eve of the announcement where we were asking for a recount of ballot boxes in the 2015 election, Mr. Ramotar went with a delegation, and we met with the entire GCOM, that is the chairman and the commissioners. And so this is highly, as I said, unusual. The second issue, in addition to the one with the young man who is now in charge of one of the counting stations, who has a lot of questions to answer about what he did on March the 5th. But the other issue has to do with where Mr. Granger himself says in the interview after he goes to meet with the chairman, and by the way, he also met with the CARICOM observers separately. So then he admits that in the interview that he does afterwards at the Aquatic Center. He met with the chairman, the CEO, DCO, and the PRO with his delegation, and then afterwards met with the CARICOM observers. Again, highly improper and highly unusual. But he did admit in the interview with the media afterwards that he had confidential discussions with the chairperson in the presence of the 3-member CARICOM team. And therefore, what was the nature of the confidential issues? Now, the PRO today said, and was questioned by the media about what was the nature of the discussions of Mr. Granger with the chairman and the DCO and the CEO. And Ms. Ward said that, these were just procedural issues. These were just procedural issues. And I wish to challenge her and say that that's not the truth. Because if we're saying Mr. Granger's truth or her truth, Mr. Granger said when he responded to the press, he said, when there was question of what are some of the issues that were discussed with the chairman, he said the issues were raised in confidence, and it was a privileged group, and it would be unacceptable for me to respond to that unless the chairman herself and the commissioners were given the opportunity to hear these issues and deliberate. And he goes on to say, 2 particular issues were raised with the chairman, and the chairman will address these issues in the fullness of time. These are not issues which at this point in time should be subject to public debate unless and until the commissioners themselves have had an opportunity to speak. So here was the president, the person who is the caretaker president, whose party has contributed to the rigging of the election, of the attempt to steal the elections from the Guyanese people for the last 70 odd days. But here he's engaging in what are confidential issues and raising 2 issues which he expects and anticipates that the chairman, in what he says, in the fullness of time, will respond to. He goes on further on and makes another comment that implies that he expects that these matters will be dealt with in accordance with how he's raised it. So the letter deals with 2 other very major issues, and I think that they're more important issues in terms of Granger's actually turning up on the Sunday with full privileges, full immunities, full protocol and everything else, and also the nature of the meetings without the presence of the commissioners. And I think that Madam Chairperson should not have allowed this. She should not have allowed it. It is improper. And therefore she then put herself in the front line for criticism. And she deserves it because she had no right engaging in that at that point. She either said, no, I won't meet with you. I have to meet in the presence of all my commissioners, as she has supposed to with any of the heads of the political parties that want to meet with her. I am not aware that there's been any private meeting with her and a presidential candidate of any other political party. So it is improper, at least, unusual, and also because we have such little confidence in the chairperson and GCOM and the Granger and his government, that this leads to, again, another feeling by people that things are going on behind the doors that the public doesn't know about and is not confident that it's in the best interest of getting these elections done credibly.
I want to take you back to the allocation of the workstations and the issue of the Region 4, because I think this is something, this is one of the things that a lot of people are questioning. You know, you have one region that has over 800 boxes, and you have that region being counted by 3 workstations. Then you have another region with just about 300 or so, just over 300, I think. But that region has more workstation than Region 4. Is this maybe an attempt to delay the completion of Region 4, bearing in mind the significant number of cases that are arising with regards to Mingo's bloated numbers in favor of APNU? Do you think it's a strategy here probably to delay, to stretch out the recount of Region 4?
Well, I think that clearly they want to stretch out Region 4 because they know that once you finish Region 4, that's over for them. Once Region 4 is completed, the country will be reaffirmed again in the supporters of the PPPC that the PPP won. And so there's one interest in delaying the Region 4 in terms of delaying the inevitable, and that is that they were defeated in the elections. The more sinister motive, and much more sinister motive, is that as they go through dealing with Region 4, we uncover more and more polling stations and SOPs where the SOP and the statement of recount match, and where the Mingo spreadsheet, that is called, but it should be Mingo GCOM spreadsheet, because this is GCOM. We may say it's Mingo's, but GCOM had a part in this whole thing. And so we call it Mingo spreadsheet for easy reference, but it's really a GCOM spreadsheet. They knew about it, they allowed it. And therefore, as the boxes come up, because remember, the third and fourth, about 300 to 400 ballot boxes were counted with the statement of poll. After the fifth and the whole confusion with the spreadsheet, Mingo continued to use the spreadsheet until the 13th, when I think, Peter, they pulled out about 70 to 80 ballot boxes and did those with statements of poll, which no one could properly see what was projected. So that as we have discovered as of, I think, yesterday, about 26 boxes so far, where they show that Mingo's spreadsheet and the and what is the statements account and statements of recount, statements of poll and statements of recount do not match. And so you have, I'll just take my favorite one, if you don't mind, as an example. This is box 4050, and it is, let me make sure I've got the light. This is the area of Pearl, where Mr. Granger voted. Sarah Johanna to Caledonia area as Pearl Nursery School, where Mr. Granger voted. And so the statements of poll and the statements of recount match completely. 139 votes for APNU, 139 votes on the statements of recount. However, on the Mingo GCOM spreadsheet, it was 229, a difference of 90 votes for APNU. And when you go to the People's Progressive Party, it is 84 for the PPP in the statement of poll, 84 for the statement of recount, and 84 in Mingo's spreadsheet. So this is in Mr. Granger's own hometown, where he voted that Mingo fiddled with the actual number of votes on his spreadsheet. And that's an example which Mr. Granger should try very hard to rectify publicly, but has not done so. And so this is just one example. There are 26 I have in front of me, which I can use, where they reduce the votes of the PPP and others in other counts on Mingo's declared figures, and where they increase the APNUs. And so there are a number of examples. One, two, I have 26 in front of me, where the numbers, they increased the APNU votes by almost 2,000. I think it was 1,800 and something, and reduced ours by several hundreds. And so this is what they also are not in a hurry to go through the region 4, because the more we go through, in other words, we can anticipate that if there were 350, say 400 ballot boxes that went through the statements to poll 3rd and 4th, and there are 879, you're talking about 500 odd ballot boxes where Mr. Mingo, and GCOM tampered with the results using the spreadsheet. And that is where they tried to now concoct a victory at the national elections by shifting approximately 20,000 votes in their favor and removing votes from us. And so the region 4 is still going to be a problem, because they're going to do everything possible to make that delay and stretch that out.
And we've got to know, Eddie, that as Comrade Gail described, there is enough evidence, even as of today, of electoral fraud by Mingo and GCOM. The term electoral fraud, it's a crime. So delaying the count again and delaying the slowness of how they count the boxes in Region 4 will not clean the slate. The fact that they have committed electoral fraud by fraudulent numbers out of a spreadsheet. And we have to keep in mind that the police commissioner and the police should already be investigating a crime that is national crime that has been committed against the state. And we need to make sure that no matter what GCOM does in the next 25 days or less, that the count will go on, that they cannot change the outcome of the statement of polls and the statement of recount that will match 100% almost than what we're seeing as of today.
All right. Both Comrade Gail and Pete, you spoke. I want to bring up on the screen quickly some of the instances that you spoke about, Comrade Gail, and just read it out so that the public can get a sense of what exactly Mr. Mingo did. And this is why the APNU AFC seemed very much afraid to allow the Region 4 recount exercise to go through as fast as possible. So I'm going to bring up some instances where
Do you have 4059 in front of you?
4059. I'll have to go to get 4059. Maybe I should try to get that one for you, Comrade Gail. So that
I have it here with me. I'm just saying if you wanted to display it for the public.
Yes, I would be grateful. That's why I'm trying to see if I can locate it, because I think people need to have an understanding of the seriousness of what Mr. Mingo did. But I have some that I think we accumulated only yesterday. You're talking about one from the Pearl area, if I'm correct.
If you can give me the ballot box number, I'll see if I have it.
No, I have them in front of me here, but I got to go through them. But I want to share some from yesterday so that the public can see. And I'm going to start here with, let me bring this up on the screen so, we can give the public an idea as to what Mr. Mingo did with regards to the boxes. Yes, I think I have it here. I'm bringing this white. So here you have 4116. This is the Diamond East. And it says here, Analog 2 from the statement of poll, statement of recount Analog 2, and the Mingo figure remain 2. Let us focus on APNU AFC. The statement of poll says 138 for APNU AFC. The statement of recount says 138. Mr. Mingo's figure that he declared is 188. He gave the APNU AFC 50 more votes. With regards to the PPP, it says the statement of poll says 99. The statement of recount says 99, but Mr. Mingo declared 69. So he took 30 votes there from the PPP. I'm going to skip to 4120 quickly. This is Diamond East as well. It says APNU 75 on the statement of poll, APNU 75 on the statement of recount. Mr. Mingo declared 125. Another 50 he gave APNU. The PPP, 199 on the statement of poll. Same thing on the statement of recount. Mr. Mingo declared 179. He took 20 votes from the PPP. So in 2 boxes only, he gave APNU an additional 100 votes, and the 50 that he took from the PPP essentially goes to APNU. So APNU got 150 more votes in just 2 boxes. And I can maybe go to one more, Comrade, before I bring you in. And this is Diamond Central. This is just one community we're dealing with here, Diamond. APNU on statement of poll is 133. Statement of recount, 133. Mingo's declared figure is 163, 30 more. The PPP, 178 on statement of poll, 178 on statement of recount. Mr. Mingo declared 158. So he took 20 votes there from the PPP. So those are just 3 boxes.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ms. Gail.
Yeah, I mean, I just have 1 or 2 other boxes because, again, the pattern is similar. Taking 100, giving 100 additional to APNU and taking away numbers from the PPP, approximately 20 to 30 on each box. So that in Supply Land of Canaan, box 4059 at Supply Primary School, APNU on the statement of poll 61, on the statement of recount 61, on Mingo's spreadsheet 161. Therefore, 100 votes more given to APNU. PPP won this station in the statement of poll 85, 85 in the statement of recount, but on Mingo's spreadsheet it was 65. And so we took away 20 votes from us. And that pattern is showing as you go through that they're averaging between 50 and 100 ballot votes on each of the stations that they contaminated and fingered with. And so this is all to make sure, because remember, what was clear by Wednesday as all the declarations were being made in the other 9 regions is that the PPP was ahead by 52,000 votes. And therefore it was impossible for APNU to win, to recoup that in Region 4, despite the fact that they pull in a lot of votes for Region 4. Even that, they could not win, they could not surmount the 52,000 lead that the PPP had in the 9 regions. And so that is when the confusion started, the delays at the Ashmin, and then the heart attack by Mr. Mingo, and all the other ramifications that took place to the count being stopped and the official declaration being made, although the tabulation had not been finished. So this is a conspiracy. It's a rigging, electoral stealing of the people's votes. And no matter what Mr. Granger does and comes out to the public and tries to look like Pontius Pilate and to be able to say, that he will accept the results, etc., Mr. Granger doesn't fool me, and I don't think he fools any of us, that he has his hands in this and he knows exactly what happened, and he's doing nothing to rectify it.
Having recognized both Comrade Gail and Peter, one, the fact that we're unearthing all the stealing of votes by Mr. Mingo in those declarations, and I guess by now we all know why the PNCA, PNUFC is trying to wipe out the whole issue of SOPs, because when you talk about SOPs, you hear from them now, that's the past. We're not dealing with that, because you know what is on those SOPs is not exactly what Mr. Mingo declared. And those SOPs that they have in their possession, they know for a fact those SOPs will match the ones that PPP has in its possession and the ones GCOM would have had in its possessions, because all of them were done in carbon copies. So the PNC is now saying, look, this statement of poll thing is the past. We're not dealing with that now. We're dealing with a recount. And we don't need to compare statement of poll and statement of recount. But when we look at what the declarations by Mr. Mingo, the fraudulent declarations, the bloated numbers, when we look at the meeting yesterday with Mr. Granger and so on, this meeting where he seems to not to want to say anything about what was discussed and so forth. And when we look at the actions of the COVID-19 task force with regards to the return of international observers to Guyana, because when you put the pieces together, you know, it is something that you really have to pay keen attention to, because I mean, the Carter Center has been asking to come back, and for all intents and purposes, they're being denied. When we have oil companies flying workers into this country ever so often. Comrade Gail, you may want to go first.
Well, I mean, I think the APNO isn't even trying to disguise that they don't want the observers here. They've now switched the language. They're talking about interference by foreign agencies, including they're naming a number of the bodies. Yet in the dossier that they spent a lot of money and are spending a lot of taxpayers' money, they're lobbying the American government, stating that elections were free and fair. So the same people they're not allowing in the country and saying and implying that they were interfering. And in fact, as I said, in the Caribbean and a number of the social media areas internationally, they're spreading the rumors about that there's a foreign interference like what is happening in Venezuela with the Americans. So they're spreading that lie, but at the same time, they're going to the Americans and the American administration and trying to convince them that the elections are free and fair and that they have credible results and they are the victors, So the narrative becomes very convoluted because they're like, as Burnham said, when you ride two horses, you end up on you know what. And that is kind of what they're doing. They're trying to ride two horses at the same time. They've switched slightly the narrative, and that became clearer with Granger on Sunday when he said that the CARICOM are the legitimate, observer team. Well, were the other observer missions not legitimate too? And so how is it now that the CARICOM becomes the recognized and the legitimate one, basically because they couldn't exclude all the observers, but certainly they are now trying to switch and saying, well, only CARICOM are the legitimate ones that could come back in here. They're transparent in just the level of just madness sometimes. I think the Guyanese people are being bombarded psychologically and emotionally, financially, by a level of insanity in a sense that's going on. I mean, Peter, you talked about the economy. I'm getting reports from the interior, which are just dread in terms of what's happening there with people's lifestyles. I mean, I just want to give an example. Today, I was traumatized by hearing from an area I had gone into work in the election period where a 12-year-old girl committed suicide because she was motherless and she grew up with her grandmother, and she was accused of eating too much food. They didn't have enough food in the house, and she was eating too much food, and the child went and hung herself. And that may look like an aberration in our context, but to graphically give the point that what Peter was saying about the state of the economy and how people are punishing. There is no interest in this government to deal with those issues. The lockdowns and the curfews is all militaristic in this style, not a public health approach, not an approach to bring relief. I was reading the speeches of Skerritt and other prime ministers in the region, Prime Minister Rowley, of the kind of social relief programs they have for the people. There's nothing like that here. And so all of this about COVID is being used as a political weapon. I'm not belittling that COVID is serious or that it exists in our country. And that's another discussion we can have about how this government is responsible for Guyana being woefully unprepared for this pandemic then and now, and still up to now. But they're now using COVID as a means to control the issues of the recount. The point too about the issue of the flights and stuff like that. Peter, you will know that yesterday, I think it was that the Americans had asked for a flight to come in to take Americans out, which is what has been happening from time to time with the Brits, the Canadians, the Americans, etc., and other nationalities. They're giving permission. The planes come in empty and they go out with the nationals that need to travel. The fact that the American embassy request for a flight to come in on May the 22nd to take out US nationals after the request by the Carter Center and senators and the embassy to request after they were turned down, the second request and third request, I think the government's action is vindictive to say that the flight does not have permission to come in this country. Again, they're red flagging our country. Again, they're putting us into more serious situations. But this is the nature of the APNO AFZ: vindictive bullies and vindictive, undemocratic dictatorships, and that's what we have here. You know, there's a dictatorial situation we're in right now, and that is why, as Peter said, and we've all been saying, these recounts have to be done expeditiously, transparently, free and fair, so that we can get back on the road of this country and start to pull our country up by its bootstraps. It's in real trouble.
You know, I would add to Comrade Gail, you know, I call him the regular Granger, not regular Granger, but regular Granger is a dishonest man. You know, he must wake up the other night and believe he's big boy. He's going to fight the Western world and the international community. He is upset, no doubt that he's upset that the international community witnessed the fraud of the people at GCOM and what they were trying to do. And the fact that Mr. Granger knows that he lost the election. He has the same SOPs that the PPP has. In 2015, he said 2 days later that he's already counted all his SOPs and he knew that he won the election. The PPP said the same thing in 2020. 2 days later, we counted all our SOPs and we know we won the election. Mr. Granger has never produced his SOPs. For him to walk around playing big boy, bad boy, the regular, to think that he can tell the Americans they can't fly into Guyana when every other flight has been approved, he wants to dictate that CARICOM is his comfort level when it's not his job to interfere in GCOM. The chairperson invited all the observer groups to be part of the RECOM. Mr. Granger, the candidate of APNU, cannot determine who comes into our country to do the RECOM. Everyone got to follow the COVID-19. We believe in that. But he said that his only belief is that CARICOM is enough. And again, that's interfering with GCOM. And with his witness yesterday, with him going in to see the GCOM staff. So the regular Granger doesn't understand. He can't wake up and believe he's big boy. The world has already seen the fraud. The electoral fraud is evident. The beneficiaries of the electoral fraud will pay a severe price. Criminals that is benefiting from the electoral fraud. The fact that you're taking, you know, a building, the owner of that building of Ocean View, that as somewhat submitted to the government to give them that building for a price. That was done during the electoral fraud process. The beneficiaries of the electoral fraud, ministers that are acting illegally, that is collecting money from the government or from the treasury. The fact that our reserves are under 500 million now, it was 700 million almost when the PP left office in 2015. It's under 500. We don't even have 2 months emergency money left. The public deposit accounts is in the negative, $85 million. The government, current Granger, is raping the treasury. And the people of Guyana needs to realize when Dr. Irregular takes over, he's got a big task ahead of him. Because we got to find money to run the nation. We've got to put the development plans in place. And he needs that opportunity right now to ensure that his economic development plan that he's proposed, that he's working. He started that with the National Stakeholder Forum, which Comrade Gail is part of. It not was just passing out mass. It's an economic development plan. It's a social plan. It's a development plan that he looks across the country and he's developing the next steps to put Guyana back on track. And Mr. Granger knows that, and instead of him stepping down, conceding the election, and stop the madness from his people, that they are saying that dead people vote and and migrants vote, GCOM, the day, and all of us just have to remember, when we go into that polling station, we had our ID check, we had our finger check, we had our name checked off. The fact is, no dead people voted, no migrants voted. Where did they come up with? And is Mr. Granger throwing the entire GCOM secretariat under the bus and blaming them for some fraud now? So he's trying to shift the narrative every day. So we've got to put emphasis on Mr. Granger, the fact he knows exactly what is going on, and he needs to stop the madness and the stupidness of holding the country hostage for him to feel like a big boy and wants to stay on as president as long as he can. His days are numbered. We have a president-elect who's President Irfan Ali. When the recount is finished, it will validate what the SOPs have already said publicly to the nation, that Irfan Ali is the duly elected president of Guyana.
Peter, I think you touched on the next issue I wanted to raise. That is these frivolous, baseless allegations and accusations of dead people voting and migrants voting, and a sort of petty issues we find that they're raising, which I think is part of their larger plan of frustrating the process, delaying the process, because one would recall that they fought very hard to have the observation report read during the tabulation, which by itself is taking up a lot of time. And they are trying to prove that, and I mean, what was approved, what GCOM published in the order, in the official gazette, was for a recount of the ballots. But they are throwing in all these other things, which is part of their plan to frustrate and delay the process. Comrade Gail, let us talk a little bit about the lies that you have. We hear Aubrey Norton and all the others are singing different tunes, and these frivolous kinds of objections that they're making.
I mean, they know I'm writing a letter to do with what a tangled web we weave when we first practice to deceive. And so you have all these Amna and Kathy Hughes and Aubrey Norton, who was a rigger in his own, even in his own party, he was accused of rigging, and he accused Granger them of rigging in one of the congresses. Aubrey Norton has come out from wherever he was hiding. And you have Patterson, Ramjatan, Moses, all the actors have been pulled out to go out, and some of them are, and Basil Williams, of course, who's always putting his foot in his mouth. And so they're all in their haste and in their attempt to show that the elections were not credible, although they're going to the Americans and they're saying that they won, that somehow GCOM and the PPP rigged the elections so that APNU could win. And if that is not a defiance of logics, that why would the PPP want to rig an election or rig any election in the first place, but why would rig election so that APNU won? And APNU now is waiting on, according to Granger, the correct conclusion. You see, I listened very carefully to Mr. Granger on Sunday, and I don't take anything he says as a misstep or that one in which accidentally he said anything. But when he was talking to the media, he made it very clear that they want a speedy conclusion. But he didn't use the phrase that he's been regurgitating all the time. He said he's been talking about credible results all the time. From last year to now, when he wanted the House registration, he wanted credible results. Right through, he's been using that phrase. However, on Sunday, he didn't say that. He said that they want a speedy conclusion, but to a correct conclusion. He switched from credible results to a correct conclusion. Now, again, I'm conspiratorial, but I believe that when he says correct conclusion, is that he means the conclusion where the APNU AFC are declared the winners. So I don't trust anything that he says. However, to go back to the claims, I want to remind the viewers that we went through the house to house, and it was aborted by the ruling of the Chief Justice, which was that you cannot scrap the national database of registrants. You cannot take someone's name off the list. if they've migrated. Residency is not a clause in Guyana in the Constitution or any law. And that even to remove a person who's dead, you have to produce a death certificate. Very clear. And the house was aborted. They then had the claims and objection. And I want to remind the viewers that the APNU AFC for November the 4th to I think it was November the 14th or November the 10th, I may be wrong in a few days there. APNU AFC put approximately 15,000 objections. Region 5, Region 6, Region 9, and Region 1. Regions 7 and 9, sorry. In Region 7, they had 1,100 objections. 90-odd% was thrown out because one, the persons, they didn't have any death certificates for any of the person they claimed were dead, and that people who knew the people said, no, they're alive, right there at the objection period. They also claimed that people were not in the region, not at the house address where they were, or they were migrated overseas. Again, all these were thrown out. 11,000 objections in Region 5 were thrown out on similar grounds. Similar objections in Region 9. Therefore, they're trying to do in this period what they didn't succeed during the claims and objection. When Kathy Hughes said she got caught with the claims and objection period, when she was asked, well, why didn't you make all these objections during the claims and objection? She got totally confused because she got caught in a lie and she didn't know how to retrieve herself. And so the 15,000 they objected to in the objection period, it is coming back in full cycle again now. And so these 15,000 or 20,000 names that they're playing with from since last year to now is that to try to ensure that the PPP in that case at that time was to reduce what they thought were supporters of the PPP. In this period is to try to show that these are persons who weren't entitled to vote. But they're forgetting, one, there was a court ruling on this matter in August 2019, and that they had an opportunity where they brought 15,000 objections, 95% were thrown out by the returning officers and by those that went to higher up to the, the chief elections officer. So coming now at this point, and Amna saying that the dead got up and walked out and got out of the grave and walked to the polling station and vote, it's absolute, it's so ludicrous, so crazy to understand that this could be said on public television and to the public to make them believe it. But clearly, it is the same PNC that used to rig elections in the past, and where they used to stuff the ballot boxes, and where their Granada television documentaries showing that people overseas voted who were horses in fields and stuff like that. The party with the expertise in rigging is no other than the PNC. And that cannot take off this clothing that they have adopted from the 1960s of being riggers. No other political party has the reputation in this country of rigging. It is now part of the DNA of the PNC, and the PNC is the largest party in the APNU AFC. The DNA of the PNC as a party is one that it cannot, win an election without rigging, and that it cannot win if it doesn't rig. And so the only time in 2015 where they won by a small margin of 4,526 was that we had an election petition. We asked for recounts in the 2015, the period between May the 11th and May the 15th. We were denied on every count to have a recount, even when President Ramsaroop went to Surge Valley on the Friday before and said, look, just count these 30 because these are where the statements of poll don't match. The GCOM statements of poll don't match with the statements of poll we have. And Surge Valley said no. And we went to an election petition. It is now over 5 years later, and the election petition has been heard. But we accepted defeat. We went into Parliament and we gave them a rough time. We put their feet to the fire in the Parliament. The PNC cannot accept that. They've never been able to accept defeat. And so the rigging machinery is now trying to justify what they tried to do in the elections of 2015. And obviously, They did a number of things with the voters list as well. We knew the voters list wasn't 100% perfect because people who had registered in the claims objection, some of their names did not appear on the list. People who had been in the house tower, some of their names were put in other locations. And it is the PPP's machinery that had to check those names and find those people and let them know where they could vote, because they were assuming they were on the list where they registered and they were not. So there's a lot of fiddling they did prior to the election. But nevertheless, despite all of that, we won. And we won by a large margin of 3 seats, which they cannot claim to in any way come near to in these elections.
Peter, quickly, your closing comments, because we're almost out of time.
Well, as we move forward, I mean, Mr. Granger needs to realize, the regular, that he's here because he failed the country in the last 5 years, did not fulfill any promises. He raped the economy. We lost 30,000 jobs. People voted him out of office. So we're all going on today with recount and validation of the votes because Mr. Granger was voted out of office because he failed Guyana. And as we move forward, and as the recount will prove that the statement of polls are authentic, the numbers show, as Comrade Gail said, the PP has won this election, 15,000 votes. There's no path for Mr. Granger ever to be president of Guyana again in 2020. And he has to get to the point, wake up one morning and realize if he wants to use the word honesty and decency, which he's not, he has to concede. He's holding the nation hostage. Our people are complaining. We have a health crisis with us. We have an economic crisis. We need leadership in our country. We need the president-elect to be sworn in, and we need GCOM to do their job. They're being paid a lot of money, get on with counting of the votes, and ensure that the will of the people, as Mr. Golding said, and the OAS and the Commonwealth and the Carter Center and AmCham and the local observers and the voters, that it was a fair, free, clean election. The count was there. We saw the rigging by Mingo and GCOM. We understand now it's been validated, it's been proven, and Mr. Granger needs to know that it's time for him to go. And I hope, with any goodness of his heart that is left, he's a praying man, as everybody said, but a praying man would never do this to our nation and let our people suffer. So Mr. Granger needs to move on. GCOM needs to complete this process and let our president-elect, Dr. Irregular, takes the leadership of our nation. The next 5 years is going to be beautiful. We've got a great development plan, great economic plan, where every single Guyanese, across the political divide, across race, color of your hair, texture of your hair, or your color of your skin, Dr. Ali said he will be the president of all Guyana, and he wants to implement his economic and development plan for Guyana as soon as we finish this recount.
Comrade Gail, I don't know. You have probably about a minute or so to give your closing comments.
Beg your pardon?
I said you have probably about a minute or so to give your closing comments.
No, I think that Peter summed it up well. Our people are really having a difficult time, and the economy and people's personal lives have been on hold. They've been on hold before the elections, throughout these 70-odd days that we've been going through. I don't think there's any precedent in history where a country has waited so long for election results. And this is mainly because APNU AFC, led by Granger, wants to hold on to power indefinitely. I still believe that they still have other things up their sleeve, and therefore I think we have to be very vigilant. I agree with Peter that once we can get over this major hurdle and this impediment that the PPPC in government and Irfan Ali as our president, we have an enormous amount of work to do to reconstruct our country. The health sector is basically near collapse even before the elections. The economy is in trouble. Whilst the election's been going on, other workers have lost their jobs. And so it's not just the 30,000, it's more than 30,000 now, including because of COVID. It's more than $30,000 who don't have a job. And so this is a government that has a leader who has no conscience whatsoever. And I think one of the important things we must recognize that we have to stay vigilant in this period, every single day, every hour in the convention center and outside of it, to make sure we're on top of it, that we've been successful in preventing many times between March the 2nd and now attempts to declare the results for Mr. Granger. We've been successful in preventing and preempting these conspiracies and plots. However, we're not over yet. And so we have to keep being vigilant, and our people to remain positive and not get demoralized, that there will be victory. We will get to the end of this. We will have Irfan sworn in. We will have a PPPC government that will have an enormous responsibility. But we got to keep our eyes on what is now at the moment and over this recount, day by day, every single day. And therefore, one of the important things we have to keep raising over and over again is to expedite the recount. For every day it takes longer, it worsens the conditions of our people, and it also keeps the APNU AFC in government longer, and Mr. Granger thinking he's the president still. And so there's 1,700, I think, and 25 boxes still to be counted. You said at the beginning of the program, this was day 13. So we're halfway through the 25 days, and we haven't even come to halfway the number of boxes that need to be done. So we need to expedite it, and we need to be able, that the chairperson has to take decisions that are in the interest of expediting this. This is not a mechanical process. This is one in which the recount will determine the fate of Guyana, the fate of democracy in Guyana. And therefore she has to start acting as if she understands the magnitude of the responsibility by the Constitution she's carrying, and can't pander to secret meetings with Mr. Granger and top PNC officials. And then everyone says these are confidential, we can't talk about it. But according to Granger, we must have a correct conclusion. And so I think that we have to look up the road, as Peter says, that what we'll have to do and how we'll have to reconstruct and to unify our people and build a platform where all our people have a place. But we still have this impediment in front of us that we must overcome, and we must make sure and prevent APNU AFC from trying any shenanigans more to try to actually stop the recount. And so I think for our viewers, we want to thank them for remaining calm and remaining so clear on what is going on in this country, and staying firm that they want to uphold democracy, that they want it to live in a democratic country, not a dictatorial country led by a dictator. And that's important, that the majority of people in this country want to live in a democracy. They don't want to live in a dictatorship. And so that, I think, is keeping people, in a sense, engaged and more concerned as every day goes by, that there must be no incursion on the democracy and democratic process of our country, that democracy must prevail and democracy must win.
Thank you very much, Comrade Gail, Peter, for joining us this evening. And of course, to our viewers, we want to say thank you very much for being part of this program.
Okay, thanks. You finished 1 minute before.